Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of UFHL Now here on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. My name is Dean Millard, owner of Duckman's Domination, and you can find us on the UFSN, the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, on Twitter at UFS Network. You can also email UFSN at UFF Sports.com, and you can find Duckman's Domination on Twitter at Ducks Domination. All right, we've got an awesome show as usual lined up for you. Of course, UFHL Now, officially sponsored by Instat, and we have a terrific partnership with these guys. Check it out. You can see all kinds of great videos of players and terrific statistics as well. So I highly recommend checking out the fine folks at Instat and the program that they have. There you go. Some great statistical information provided to owners in the UFHL. Thanks very much to the fine folks running this program for giving us those tools. It's great. I love going on there and just looking at video of the different players. You know, it helps me out with players that I have to make decisions on, or players that, you know, I might be wanting to bring in down the road, or something of that variety. Okay, so we have a crazy awesome show for you. We're going to have some jersey news to tell you about. We have some voting news, but some upcoming meetings as well. Some deals, some roster moves, and some power rankings. All still to come on the program, and something a little bit later on in the show that we will be doing for the first time, and maybe the last time, is we're going to bring you the duck call. One topic at the end of every show that I'll try to touch on. Sometimes it'll be fun, sometimes it'll be serious, but always it will be focused on the ultimate fantasy hockey league. Let's get to UFHL insider Larry Fisher now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL now.
All right, let's bring in one of the busiest guys. A lot going on in the UFFS right now, but our UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, has his finger on the pulse of this league. And something that we're talking about this week, Larry, is something that I, luckily get a chance to do. I get a chance to do this show every week in front of a Duckman's Domination jersey. The reason I have that is I won a tournament when the pandemic happened. For those of you that are new to the league and new to the show, the pandemic happened, the NHL stopped, but Larry and Andrea and everybody behind the scenes dove in and created a tournament on EA Sports, the Corona Cup. My team ended up winning it. I redrafted that team and blew it up, but I got the jersey. And I think that's one of the coolest things, is that this isn't just a hockey league or a baseball league. There's contests in baseball, golf, soccer. Andy was giving away football. I know Alex will have stuff in basketball. There are rewards for the owners, and one of those rewards are some jerseys. So we're going to get to who's getting one of those and some other really cool jersey news to start out in what, again, is more than just a fantasy league. It's almost like a fantasy league family.
It is, Dean, and the UFHL is always trying to add value or add different elements to the league that separate it from a normal fantasy league. And I mean, no other fantasy leagues, you create a logo oftentimes, or a franchise name and a logo, but you never really take it to that next level of seeing what it would look like on a jersey or actually making a jersey. And so lots of jersey news this week, Dean. We'll start with the announcement that the UFHL has invested in a hockey uniform designing tool from Sports Templates. It's all done through Photoshop, and it looks pretty sharp. All credit goes to UFHL Commissioner Andrea Charanduk for this endeavor. She's been hard at work learning Photoshop and putting together these uniforms and testing them out. And she did the initial reveal featuring Leon Draisaitl of the Grizzlies yesterday, and again, looked really good. So all UFHL franchise uniforms will be recreated and brought to life using this tool. Once created, the uniforms will be sent to each franchise to use for promotion. And the first franchise, Dean, we were debating whether you do alphabetical order or standings order based on last season, or how you decide which order, or just a random draw as to what franchise gets their what order these franchises get to be created on this customized tool. And the decision was made, Dean, to do the expansion Bentley Jacks as the first franchise jersey announcement, that the Bentley Jacks will become the first franchise to have a full uniform created. And the reason is, Dean, the Bentley Jacks were the only franchise that didn't previously have a custom online jersey, and that was because they were waiting on the Seattle Kraken jersey design and pattern. Obviously, the Bentley Jacks are the UFHL's version of the Seattle Kraken, so can't wait to see the Bentley Jacks in full uniforms, such with the logos from Darwin Osman, Drew McDonald, and general manager Brennan Kopp. So that's going to be great to see the Bentley Jacks come to life on an actual jersey and uniform, and see how sharp that looks. Obviously, they have the Kraken color scheme going, so it'll look great on a jersey. And then there will be a few other franchises, Dean, by the sounds of it, that are changing or tweaking their logos for the upcoming season. And those other new look franchises will likely be unveiled next in this series, just because we want to make sure all branding is finalized prior to the start of the season on October 12th. But for the franchises that are waiting in line, this is a great time to tweak any design or shades of coloring that they may want to change from the original designs. The franchises should take this time before their name is called in the designing process to think about how they want to design their helmets, pants, gloves, socks, even skates, and any small tweaks they may want to make in terms of design and overall color scheme. It is also, Andre said, to note that it's very easy to change the name and number. So after every franchise has at least one uniform created, Andrea can go in and create any player for any franchise at any time. So you'll be able to see Colton Parayko in a Duckman's Domination uniform one day, and you can put Philip Broberg in a Duckman's Domination uniform the next day. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, that's the key here, Dean. It adds fun and it adds exposure to the league.
Yeah, and value when it comes to branding. It's just such a very, very cool thing. And I think the logos and the time and the effort that people have put into it. I mean, I look at this Bentley Jacks logo. The buzzsaw is wicked. The bone, that dog is awesome. I mean, like there's just so many almost little Easter eggs and cool things about some of these logos. When I look at ours, I love the stitches and the teeth and things like that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when you look at some of the different logos. I mean, the Ice Vikings. I think of that freaky guy from Game of Thrones whenever I see that logo, the Ice King or whatever. I mean, there's just some awesome stuff going on with the logo work, and also the platform giving back and rewarding active people and things like that, and that's what kind of led to another jersey contest, and somebody else is going to get their jersey in their hands.
Yeah, Dean, I think you're the only franchise owner, or the only franchise in the UFHL as of today that has a physical jersey, as you do for Duckman's Domination, but you won't be alone for long. The UFHL has been searching for jersey suppliers for the better part of a year already, Dean. We've wanted to provide jerseys, particularly a company that will allow for single jersey orders, which has been hard to find. For the most part, you have to get a bulk order, so 21 minimum or 12 minimum jerseys. And obviously, we're looking more for one-offs right now. Certainly the franchise owners, maybe their family or their kid wants a jersey, or their parent, but we're not at that point right now where we can order in bulk and have a warehouse full of jerseys for distribution. So we're looking for a one-off partner to do custom jerseys, and we have found one, Dean. Thanks again to Commissioner Andrea. And we are ordering one jersey to see the quality in person and then decide from there as to the partnership with this company going forward. But they've been really good to work with, and it's been promising so far. And then, Dean, the UFHL decided, like you said, how do we want to award this jersey? How do we select this jersey winner to have a physical jersey made? And we decided to do a contest that included the 12 franchises, Dean, that have been active on Twitter throughout the offseason. So 12 out of 32 UFHL franchises have been tweeting regularly and maintaining an active Twitter presence, social media presence. Those contestants included the Assassins, Bentley Jacks, Brutes, Duckman's Domination, Generals, Godfathers, Kamikaze, Mystics, North Stars, Royals, Stallions, and Stingrays. And Dean, the winner of this jersey contest was Cameron Turner of the North Stars. So the North Stars will be getting their jersey made up. A physical jersey will be sent to Cameron in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Cameron provided the quote, "I am going with the blue one, the dark home jersey. Seems fitting to get the blue one first since the color scheme started with the blue of the Oklahoma State flag." And again, Cameron's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, not exactly a hockey hotbed, Dean, but he's a huge hockey fan. And it's great to see one of the original owners, one of the OGs in the UFHL win this contest. He has been active on social media and on Twitter from day one. And then the part where we're revealing, Dean, there was a couple of reveals on today's show. Number one was the Bentley Jacks reveal that they would be the first franchise to get the custom uniform. And the second reveal, Dean, is what name and number is Cameron and the North Stars going to put on this jersey? And Cameron provided another quote. He said, "I am taking the opportunity to officially recognize Jason Robertson as the face of our franchise. The jersey will be Robertson number 21. So obviously Cameron's a big Dallas Stars fan. He's rebuilding, much like Duckman's. North Stars have been a lottery team and might be again this coming season by the looks of it. But they're going young. They got some good young talent led by a guy like Jason Robertson, who obviously made a push to get into the Calder Trophy race as Rookie of the Year this season behind the winner Kirill Kaprizov. But it's going to be great for Cameron to see one of his favorite NHL players from his favorite NHL team, Jason Robertson, on the back of the North Stars UFHL jersey. It's going to bring the league to life.
That is awesome. And I love that he's got a face of the franchise already. And this is great. This is rewarding people for being active and promoting it. It's going to take all of us to get it there. That means Twitter accounts. I know that, we're working behind the scenes on a website that is going to house Duckman's Domination, the Mighty Mallards, and high-level scouting, as well as maybe whatever other sports that we might get into under the Mildeco sports empire. So that's combining Trish and my last names. That's how clever we are. But I think it's brilliant. It's all part of building this up. And, we're not building it in one day and it's finished. We are building it over time. And as we go, franchises are getting more and more creative. And I will say, you're seeing some incredible creativity in the UFAHL right now when it comes to some videos and promotion. I think we as a league can learn from some of the owners in the UFAHL right now with some of the great stuff they're doing in there. And I think we've been doing an awesome job when it comes to social media and promotion when it comes to our owners as well.
I really like the shout out there, Dean, for the UFAHL franchises. This league only launched less than a month ago. I think if not all 32 are on Twitter, I would say, above 25 for sure. And getting close to every franchise is maintaining an active Twitter presence profile, which is great. I think the Twitter, following the Twitter for the UFAHL, the franchises, it's been fire all week leading up to the season opener. Last night, very professional and fun to follow as their inaugural campaign kicked off. So looking forward to the first full slate there on Sunday as week one continues in the UFAHL. But you're right, Dean, rewarded for Twitter activity through original tweets and promoting their franchise, the league, and the UFFS platform. That is very important. And in hockey, I think 12 franchises were active throughout the offseason. During the season, when it comes to their season preview, their roster reveals, all that, they do pick up, and I'd say we have about 20 that are active in the UFHL, but we would like to get that to 32. And one way to do that is to incentivize it. Start giving away awards, start giving away, rewards and contests that do offer up some perks to the franchises that are out there, boots on the ground, helping do that word of mouth marketing, because that is very important for the league, is the franchises to be out there promoting and being the front lines of helping recruit more people into the platform, as far as somebody sees it and wants to become a scout, or maybe somebody finds an assistant GM or something by tweeting and somebody takes notice. So certainly the UFHL encourages all 32 franchises to create and maintain Twitter accounts as a means of building their followings and fan bases. And Dean, when it comes to creating jerseys, you need somebody to buy these jerseys. One way to get somebody to buy these jerseys is to get a Twitter account going and start promoting and really build this fan base up. So it is important. It is as important in the UFHL as it is in the NHL. And I always try to tell franchises, and that's what I've been helping with the UFAHL startup. And I told them the same thing. I said, even for the league account, right, the UFAHL on Twitter, I said, you kind of want to look what the NFL is doing and mirror that. I mean, obviously we don't have the manpower. The NFL has a 50-person social media department, but you want to, retweet your franchises, share what they're sharing. Andrea Charanduk largely handles the UFHL Twitter account, which that's recently been rebranded, Dean. It used to be at UFH League. Now it is at the UFHL. We've got a consistent approach to all social media now with the and the league name. So, but certainly Andrea does a great job there. And we want to see all the leagues kind of mirroring what the NHL is doing. And you got to get eyes on the league in order to get more people coming. Especially we got betting coming as well, Dean, which was unveiled for the UFAHL this week as a beta version. But all this promotional stuff, we're going to reward the franchises and the scouts that put in the most time to help promote the league.
And one thing I would recommend to any franchise owner, whether in the UFAHL or the UFHL or the upcoming UFBA or UFLB, whatever league you are in, when you put something on social media, include the league Twitter handle, because then they will be able to retweet it. There's some really good promotion out there, but make sure you include that league handle so that they can also promote it and get it out to a wider base. And so lots of things that we can do, all working together, and I think it's awesome. And working together is kind of what has been happening for some weekends here. We skipped the long weekend, but we've got another meeting coming up this weekend, and then another one next weekend. But let's take a look at some of the results of round 3 of voting from the very first meeting now, Larry.
Yeah, Dean, we put the finishing touches on meeting 1 of 3 for the UFHL, and we can take a look at the results. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them, but it is interesting to note that penalty minutes were being lowered. The value of penalty minutes, it's dropping from 0.5 down to 0.25 for the coming, or for a 3-year window, because the first round of voting was to implement these changes gradually. So in penalty minutes case, it'll go to 0.42, so only going down 0.08 per year for 3 years, 0.42, 0.34, and ending up at 0.25, which was the winning vote for what a penalty minute should be valued at. The fights, the franchises voted in favor of adding a separate fight category, and then voted in favor of making sure that a fight was still worth the same amount in the new system as it was when penalty minutes were 0.5. So that was a pretty overwhelming vote, that franchises wanted fights to be equivalent to 2.5 fantasy points, which is the same as a goal or an assist, Dean, as well as a goalie win. So a fight is valued at the same as a goal and assist. But as we look from research, Dean, there was the fight leaders last season only had 6 and 7 fights respectively. So it's not a category that's going to be hitting every game, obviously. And then again, so it shows the adjustment there for how it'll gradually get up to the 1.25 points from 0.4 to 0.8 progression. Item number 3, Dean, was plus minus lowered, and plus minus is mirroring penalty minutes, actually, Dean. It's also going from 0.5 to 0.25 over a span of 3 seasons. So the same progression, 0.42, 0.34, and ending up at 0.25. In this case, Dean, it wasn't as much of a consensus. 24 franchises did want a change in plus minus. They did want it lowered. 8 franchises were in favor of the status quo, keeping it at 0.5. In the follow-up vote, Dean, 7 voted to lower it, and none of them were voted to remove it of the other 7 that had originally voted status quo. So the total ended up being 17 in favor of lowering and 14 wanted it removed. I know you proposed to remove it. Yeah, you did get it knocked down in halfway down in value, which is a step that I'm sure you're happy with, but plus minus lives on in the UFHL. And actually, the reason that adds up to 31 instead of 32 is the Dynasty franchise abstained from voting. In their opinion, they wanted status quo. Once status quo was eliminated as an option, they didn't want to vote towards lowering or removing. They just felt that they weren't satisfied with the remaining options, so they abstained from voting there. But as we mentioned, Dean, plus minus is going down from 0.5 to 0.25 over the course of 3 seasons. So the value of a plus or a minus is down halfway. And I'll let you weigh in because I know this is a statistical scoring category that's near and dear to the heart of Duckman's domination owner.
Yeah, near and dear to the trash bin when it comes to Duckman's domination. But, you know, we at least we made it. I kind of look at what some of the other GMs were saying is like lowering. It's not going to make that much of a difference. I just think, you know, I can't remember the last actual hockey player that told me he valued plus minus. And, you know, I think having plus minus in a league it kind of hurts credibility. That's my opinion. There are others that think that it's coming back. I'm not sure. I also think there was an error in judgment in not voting, but I'll get to that a little bit later on at the end of the show. But to each their own, right? You know, this is why we have a vote. I still think everybody should vote, even if you don't agree. I think you should be having your say. And there's no reason why this can't be proposed again down the road. Maybe it gets more traction as you go. As we've talked about a lot of times NHL rules are up 3 or 4 different times before they actually kind of get into things. So as with other proposals from other franchise owners, this might come back again, and we'll see what happens. But at least there was some discussion about it, and you can kind of keep pounding the drum if you want to do that. If our franchise or others, I know Brent of the Royals is not a big fan of it as well. So it's interesting, and it's a good first discussion, I think.
For sure, Dean, and shout out to Brent of the Royals. It's his birthday, so happy birthday, Brent. And certainly, as you see, there was 24 in favor of a change. So, I mean, it was still the vast majority of the league felt plus minus was overvalued, if not irrelevant to the league. So it is trending down in the eyes of the UFHL franchises. And as you mentioned, Dean, out of all the scoring categories that were put forward, not all of them resulted in a change. And you can see on the next slide here that a number of categories are staying status quo. That included hits, which actually was 24 in favor of remaining at 0.25 for a hit. Shots are staying the same. And the way this worked, Dean, I should note for the viewers, it required a 2/3 majority of expected votes. So there's 32 franchises in the UFHL as there is in the NHL. If all 32 voted, you would need 22 votes. And actually, you need 22 votes regardless because it's 22 votes of the expected turnout. So you needed 22 here in order to enact a change. As you'll see, some of the yeses are leading. There was more in favor of raising shots than against, but they didn't get to that 22. They only got 18. Same with the value of shutouts, only got to 19. The value of saves is staying the same. And then as far as adding even strength time on ice, it was literally right down the middle, 16-16. But adding shorthanded time on ice, Dean, it was 21-11, which is only 1 vote short. All 32 franchises voted, and it was only 1 vote short of being implemented. Obviously, quite the majority there wanted shorthanded time on ice, but you need that 22nd vote, 2/3 expected majority in order to, or 2/3 majority of expected votes in order to implement a change. And so, Dean, as far as my takeaways from meeting 1, the only surprise to me, Dean, was the resounding no on lowering the value of hits. As we've seen, there was 24 franchises wanted hits to remain at value. I thought there would have been more in favor of lowering that value just because hits are currently worth more than shots in the UFHL scoring system. And Ryan Malone, our resident NHL star and obviously our NHL who played in the NHL and who also was an Olympian, Ryan Malone stressed how much easier it is to get a hit than a shot in the NHL. So he's speaking from experience. Personally speaking, I do find it a bit strange that hits and blocks are both worth more than a shot. Sorry, Dean. So a hit or a blocked shot is worth 0.25 going forward, whereas a shot on goal is only worth 0.2. So that was something that took me by surprise, as well as Battlehawks GM Mick Portoni. He also had a similar sentiment. His quote was, "Shocker out of this round of votes for me. UFHL teams having issues with plus minus staying at 0.15% impact, but not having issues with hits staying at 14% impact." So as you can see, 14% impact is very high for hits. The new category, blocked shots, that was a no-brainer in my opinion, and it was almost unanimous at a 30-1 voting result. That adds value, Dean, to a lot of defensive specialists and penalty killers. Also interesting, as mentioned, the shorthanded time on ice was only one vote away from being added at 21-11. Something in regards to plus minus and this kind of conversation was Dynasty GM Mark Yates. He said, whoever owns Ryan Graves, that is the Grizzlies, he is no longer worth his contract or his NHL cap hit that he received specifically for being among the top plus minus players in the NHL year in and year out. Referencing that Ryan Graves' real world cap hit has been devalued in the UFHL by the decision to lower plus minus from 0.5 to 0.25, which will obviously go down to 0.42 for the upcoming season, going down by 0.08 for each of the next 3 seasons. Personally, Dean, I believe adding blocked shots at 0.25 probably increases Ryan Graves' value more than lowering plus minus will decrease his value in the big picture, because blocked shots, Dean, are an accumulating stat. They only go up. Every game you block a shot, you're going to keep adding points. You're going to add 0.25 throughout the course of the season for every blocked shot you get. Whereas plus minus is a fluctuating stat. It balances out over the course of the season, especially in a total points league. In a head-to-head league, it has more impact week to week, but it does have a minimal impact in comparison because blocked shots are accumulating and plus minus is fluctuating. But again, Dean, I stress one more vote in favor of shorthanded time on ice. That might have replicated Ryan Graves' real-world value. It was that close. And as you mentioned, Dean, there is always next year to revisit adding shorthanded time on ice, lowering the value of hits, whatever the franchises see throughout this season with these new categories, as you see here on the screen, Dean, recapping the changes for 21-22. As we see how these changes impact the value of the players and how they performed this past season to the new season, there will be more tweaks to the scoring categories going forward in the UFHL.
Yeah, and if shorthanded time on ice or some sort of time on ice comes in, that also, I agree with you. I think that the plus minus devalue is balanced out by block shots, and if we get time on ice, and I think we have to look at these things big picture of as opposed to a la carte. Let's look at this as a big buffet, and we want to get the buffet all the ingredients right. So some categories are going to offset with others and augment others and things like that. So I think when we're looking at this, we're like, okay, we're moving in the right direction to bring players like this forward. Maybe another vote gets shorthanded time on ice in there or something like that, because some stats are going to affect other players and other positions. It's just, when we're doing baseball, we're trying to have a balance between guys like pitchers who start every 5 days versus guys that play every day. And you don't want to make one position way out of whack from the real world. I think in the AFL, they got it great with quarterbacks being so important because they are in real life. And these players like Ryan Graves, while not top pairing guys, and other players, Jacob Slavin was an example, are important players on those teams. We've used the example of Jay Bomeister in the past. So I think what we're all striving for is trying to get it as realistic as possible.
Absolutely, Dean. That is the goal, to emulate their real-world value as closely as possible with the scoring system. And certainly, Dean, I think another important thing here is the gradual implementation over the course of 3 seasons. So we're not drastically changing a player value by lowering it all at once for this coming season, where you only have a month to adjust to penalty minutes going down half value. They're only going down 0.08 for 3 consecutive seasons. So you do have time to adjust to the trends of the UFHL scoring system, which I think is important. But ultimately, emulating that real world value, because we are full salary cap leagues, which is the point Mark was making, is that we're paying this player in the UFHL the same salary he's getting in the NHL. And if we're not incorporating those categories that reflect the reason he's getting that cap hit in the NHL, then he actually, even though he's a very serviceable player in the NHL, he has a negative value because of his cap hit being higher in the UFHL than what he brings to the scoring system. So it's all about finding that balance and trending towards emulating real world values as closely as possible.
And lots still to be discussed this weekend. I believe we're going at the same time as usual for the owners, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. out in the Pacific region. And this is what we'll be discussing on the agenda this weekend.
Yeah, Dean, this is the meeting number 2 agenda, meeting 2 of 3. So this Saturday and next Saturday are the final UFHL offseason owners meetings. We don't have to go into too much detail here because we'll obviously be recapping these items on next week's show, Dean, and we'll have more voting to discuss. But certainly active roster configuration was a big one. In the NHL, you're allowed to dress 7 defensemen and 11 forwards on any given day. You don't have to dress 12 and 6, which was the traditional lineup was 12 forwards, 6 defensemen. More and more going 11 and 7. So the proposal to switch to that, as well as the proposal to switch to actual NHL positions. Instead of 12 forwards, you need 4 left wingers, 4 centers, and 4 right wingers. 3 left shot defensemen or left side defensemen, 3 right side defensemen. So the active roster configuration is a topic. The expanded protected lists and total roster size. Right now it mirrors the NHL with 23-man active roster, 50 total contracts, or a 27-man protected list that equals 50 total contracts. But the NHL does have that 40-man reserve list that takes it to a 90-player total roster. There's a couple proposals there, Dean. One to just add 5 unsigned prospects that can take it from 50 to 55, or the protected list from 27 to 32, as well as to actually mirror the NHL and go all the way up to 90 with the 40-man reserve or 40 prospect reserve list. The point there that I made, Dean, is that the NHL has a 7-round draft versus a 2-round auction. So every year the NHL does need 5 extra, on average 5 extra spots per year for their rounds 3 to 7 prospects. So that's why they have a bigger expanded roster. The UFHL deadline extensions, Dean, delayed from the NHL. This past season, we mirrored the NHL. If the NHL deadline was 3 p.m. for trades, the UFHL deadline was 3 p.m. But obviously, some franchises want that window at least to the end of the day, if not 24 or 48 hours later, to allow for some flexibility and some time to react and adjust to decisions made in the NHL, whether that's a waivers deadline, trade deadline, preseason roster deadline. What if somebody in the NHL gets surprisingly sent down to the AHL? If your rosters due at the exact same time, you might have put them on the active roster and you might have to send somebody else through waivers that you otherwise would have flipped that decision if you knew that player was going down in the NHL. So in my opinion, that makes a lot of sense, whether we can go 24 or 48 hours later, or based on time constraints with the start of the season and the trade deadline, maybe you got to go just end of day. So instead of 3 p.m., it's midnight. That's an option. Waiver rule amendment, Dean. This is one that is changing for the coming season. The league is implementing this rule update, and that is starting in 21-22. Waiver eligibility rules will also apply to all scout to franchise sales. If a franchise buys a waiver eligible player from a scout, that player must go onto the active roster or go through a waivers auction in order to be placed on the protected list. Players cannot go straight from a scout to the protected list if they are waiver eligible, only if they are waiver exempt. This is a rule amendment, Dean, that prevents stashing and hoarding NHL players on protected lists during the season. Last season, players were allowed to be purchased from scouts and placed directly on protected lists without a waivers auction, but that doesn't mirror the NHL. As an example, last season, Zach McEwen was purchased by the Ice Vikings. Starting this season, if the Ice Vikings bought McEwen from their affiliated scout upon his prospect status expiring midseason, so when he's played his 26 games, they turn pro when they're no longer rookie status, eligible for the Calder Trophy, they would need to make room for McEwen on their active roster at the time of sale, or send McEwen through a waivers auction in order to be placed on the protected list. So that's a rule amendment that's just, again, mirroring the NHL. We want to stay as realistic as possible. That's how it works in the NHL. It makes sense that that's automatically how it works in the UFHL. A waiver rule proposal, again, trying to mirror the NHL, Dean, reclaiming players. And I won't get into too much detail on this because time constraints, but certainly reclaiming players. If you put in a claim and you win a waivers auction for the minimum bid that of a player that you had previously lost on waivers, and it's the franchise you lost them to that is then placing the player on waivers a week later or a month later, anytime within that current season, if you win that auction for the minimum bid, you can reclaim the player and you can send that player directly to the protected list or to your UFAHL affiliate. You don't have to create or have an open spot on the active roster if it's a player you're reclaiming that you had previously lost on waivers to that same franchise. And last but not least, Dean, a proposal from Jesse Gill of the Brutes to allow SCO trades, meaning you could buy and sell players without hockey assets involved. That was voted down at last year's meetings, Dean. It was quite resounding result that the franchises did not want straight cash or straight SCO trades. It is coming up again for another round of discussion, if not another round of voting to, in some cases, maybe some parameters put in place where a trade could be for SCO without an asset coming back. Somebody mentioned, what if you have your 50-man list full and you can't, take on or you can't take back an asset, a pick or a prospect or whatever. So you'd rather have SCO because you don't have room. There are a few franchises at the 50-man limit. So that would be a scenario where maybe you could do SCO trades, but whether or not you put parameters on it or whether or not this is a repeat of last year's vote where franchises don't want to get into the business of buying and selling players for SCO. Those are the topics, Dean, that we're going to be discussing in tomorrow's meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure where I am on SEO only in trades. I mean, I think it's always prudent for a franchise to make sure they have a few spots available if different trades come up. And we pointed out if you're going into the draft and you had 9 picks like we did, you had to free up 9 spots. And we released some players to get to that. We put some of the prospects up for trade, which we eventually did trade, and one of them was Gunnar Wolf-Fontaine, great name by the way. But I do see the point of some of the owners, and I think it's great because I went into the previous year's meetings thinking that every team should get paid. And then as the season went on and I talked to more owners, I started seeing their side and realized non-playoff teams are getting paid from the leasing. And so sometimes you see something one way, you listen to the discussion of other people. You might not agree with it right away, but it sinks in and it goes that way. So I think that's really, really, really important to be able to have those discussions. And then, on the proposal that we put in, Duckmans, to maybe look at individual players, by no means are we thinking, it's not even a proposal. I think I worded that poorly. I think it's just a discussion point I want to have about, is there an appetite? Where would we find this stuff? I think something like that is probably like a 5-year window of getting it implemented or something like that, because that's a real step. Football started that way and baseball will be starting that way with outfield positions and everything else. But I think that's a bigger transition that needs more time and certainly needs way more discussion. And I think that's what owner meetings are great for, is getting that ball rolling and see where it rolls to.
Exactly, Dean. And next weekend's meeting is very much that. It's very much hypotheticals and what do you think about this? How did this work? What direction should we go there? But I do think the specific positions, as far as needing left wingers, right wingers, centers, to mirror an NHL depth chart, an NHL roster, it would give you more parity across the league as well, because franchises would have to adjust accordingly to positions. But I think you're right, Dean. I think you're looking at least a 5-year window to transition into that. Maybe it's a gradual transition. Maybe 2 seasons from now you need at least 2 left wingers, 2 right wingers, 2 centers. Yeah. And then the year after you need 3, and then you need 4, kind of thing. Again, that 3-year gradual transition into specific roster positions to mirror the NHL, which makes sense because that's the goal of the league. And certainly with the point you made on the SCO trades and the full rosters, Dean, that is, again, what you were saying is mirroring the NHL. How many NHL teams right now, you can go to Cap Friendly and look how many are right at 50 contracts? Probably 0, maybe 1. They almost always leave 3 to 5 spots open. And that's what if they want to make a 1 for 2 trade where they get a player and a prospect back for a player. You need that open spot for that prospect What if a junior player starts lighting it up, a free agent mid-season, and you want to sign him in the UFHL? You want to sign a player from your scout because suddenly he's on the NHL radar mid-season. You need that spot open. So strongly recommended for UFHL franchises not to pack their 50-man list because they do back themselves into a corner when it comes to trade negotiations. And I don't know if SCO should be the get out of jail free card there that you can just buy your way out of accept money in exchange for a player to open up a spot or whatever the case. But certainly lots of discussion at both tomorrow's meeting with these agenda items as well as next weekend's meeting with more of the hypotheticals.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some good discussion. I'm really looking forward to that. All right, not a whole lot of amount of trades this week, but we can quickly run through some of them here, Larry.
Yeah, this was the big one, Dean. There's only 4 trades in total. This was the most notable trade, Kamikaze and Blackhawks. Kamikaze, again, Dean, they're trying to improve the win now scenario. They added a goaltender, Joonas Korpisalo, to back up John Gibson. Last week that they had offloaded a goalie, and now they had Joseph Corner and Philip Gustafson as 2 waiver exempt backups. Well, now they have their backup on the NHL on the active roster, Joonas Korpisalo, as well as Vladislav Nemestikov, who will have a decent role in Detroit. And Donnie Talk, the owner of Kamikaze, owner GM, is a big Montreal Canadiens fan. Another future Montreal Canadian first-round pick, Caden Gooley, is now a member of Kamikaze. On the other side, Dean, from the Battlehawks perspective, Moritz Seider is one of the top defense prospects in the NHL. He's going to be an impact player for Detroit, a big part of their rebuild on the back end, certainly. So he's the key piece there going to the Battlehawks, which is Mick Portoni and Alessandro Scianci. And the thing there, Dean, they're based in Italy, but they scout Germany, they scout Switzerland extensively through draft in Europe. And they know all about Moritz Seider. Jake Gardner's an interesting throw-in, Dean. He's undergoing surgery, and he's going on LTIR. He'll miss this entire season. So you don't have to take his cap hit for this season because he's on LTIR. So that's basically just the throw-in to, again, free up a roster spot for Kamikaze. And also included, Dean, were the rights to prospect Ilya Safonov. And those rights actually transferred from Paul Easton to Mick Portoni as a scout. So Ilya Safonov isn't on the Battlehawks protected list yet, but he's on there. He's sort of outside the protected list, but his rights are sort of part of this transfer as well. So they got 160 SCO in the deal. That 160 SCO was used to purchase Ilya Safonov to complete this trade.
Very, very interesting deal, and I love seeing other teams build as they go, just like we are doing here. All right, the Royals are going to be prevalent in the show as we go, so let's start them off here.
Yeah, they're busy this week putting the finishing touches on their opening night roster. But one thing the Royals have been dangling was Antti Ranta and a goaltender, obviously. They want to go with Ilya Sorokin and Vitek Vanasek as their goaltending tandem, so they had an extra body there in Antti Ranta. 3's a crowd. Antti Ranta is the odd man out. You can't roster 3 goalies in the UFHL, and he would have required waivers. Obviously, he wouldn't have made it through a waivers auction, so they traded him to the Godfathers in exchange for defense prospect Martin Fervery of the Washington Capitals. And this is kind of musical chairs with the goaltenders, Dean, as franchises finalize that position. But as you can see in the Royals' next trade, it also involves goaltending. Or sorry, the Godfathers' next trade also involves goaltending. In this case, it's the Godfathers. They bring in Antti Ranta. Now they need to adjust their goaltending because they wanted they probably assume here, Dean, that Ville Husso, the backup in St. Louis, wouldn't clear waivers. He's no longer in the Godfathers' top 2, so they're looking at moving him on. The North Stars had room to potentially bring Ville Husso in to compete for their number 2 spot. They do have Casey DeSmith, and I'm drawing blanks on their second goalie now, Dean, but they have another goalie that's kind of a number 2 in the NHL. So Ville Husso will essentially compete for a roster spot at North Stars training camp, or he'll be on the waiver wire prior to the season. And Godfathers take back Alex Lyon, another goalie in this swap who is going to need waivers, but is more likely to clear waivers. And they get a second-round pick in exchange for Ville Husso.
That's interesting. Every time I hear Arnie say that they think they're done, it's kind of like is it almost like the GM saying, my coach is okay? When the GM comes out and backs his coach, you're thinking, oh man, the coach is in trouble. When Arnie says they're done, I expect another DM from him that they're tinkering with, kind of like the way Luke used to be. But you're always trying to tinker with your team, and they continue to do it on a smaller level.
Or how about Adam Stevens with the Outlaws roster freeze? Right. That was a running joke at the first half of last season. The Outlaws were always under a roster freeze, and by the end of the following week, they made 10 more trades. Adam Stevens sort of started that roster freeze running joke. But the Royals do feel that this was their final piece to this season's puzzle. At least Arnie announced it as such, acquiring Connor Sheary from the Red Army in exchange for Will Borgen, who was down the depth chart in Buffalo, but was selected by Seattle in the expansion draft, might get some opportunity with the Kraken. So Red Army acquires Will Borgen in exchange for Connor Sheary to the Royals.
All right, so maybe the Royals are done, and they did declare an opening night roster, and I love the debate for teams. I mean, who am I to judge somebody else's opening night roster? My roster is going to be a bottom feeder again. This is a roster that they are hoping to compete for the Klein Cup. What do you think of it?
Certainly hoping to compete for the division title in the Howe division. Arnie even made the reference that Gordie Howe's from Saskatchewan. The Royals franchise has roots in Saskatchewan. They want to win a division title for that synergy. Obviously, Alex Ovechkin, franchise player, signed a 5-year extension, but he's not getting any younger. How many 50-goal, 40-goal seasons does he have left? They want to win now based on who their franchise player is. And just the amount, Dean, here with this lineup, the amount of incoming and outgoing players, that the Royals were, I believe, the busiest franchise this offseason. I can run through the list here, Dean. The incoming players that you're seeing on this roster are Matthew Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, prospect Kent Johnson, who's not on the roster, Chandler Stevenson, Luke Hughes, another prospect, Alex Edler, Jacob Slavin, Connor Sheary, Joe Veleno, who's one of their extras, their healthy scratches, Martin Fervery, and then more prospects, Zion Nybeck, Eamon Powell, Vladislav Firstov, and Akira Schmid. So you look at that incoming list, and you really focus on guys like Tkachuk, Stützle, Edler, Slavin on the back end. You know, they've really overhauled and retooled. And again, more so veterans coming in by and large, getting some veteran experience. You look at the outgoing players, Dean, and there's some high caliber young talent here. Quentin Byfield, Bowen Byram, Dominic Kubalik, Jordan Eberle, Thomas Tatar, Denny Gurionov, Jeremy Lozon, Connor Clifton, Antti Ranta, and Will Borgen. So again, for Arnie to part with guys like Byfield and Byram, two of his favorite prospects. Obviously, Quentin Byram was a 1-for-1 trade with Tim Stützle, so that was a fun transaction. And Byfield was part of the package to acquire Matthew Tkachuk. So, but all in all, that's a lot of turnover. That's, almost half the roster in, half the roster out. But I will say, on paper, the Royals look much improved, and I think the Royals are the favorite heading into the season to win the Howe division title.
All right, well, let's start with the power rankings, and let's start with that Howe division. The Royals did not, and this is Arnie revealing the power rankings, and I'm sure Brent had a hand in this, or I don't know, maybe Brent doesn't want it. He doesn't agree, I'm not sure. It sounds like they're a fun group, though, but they have the Royals themselves a number 2 in the Howe division, and what do you think of the Orr division and their prediction?
Yeah, so with the Howe division, I think that's not wanting to be too biased and put yourself in first place. But I do like the Royals and the Gators as 1-2 in the Howe division, Dean. My personal power rankings are still a work in progress, but I think the Royals and Gators are positioned 1-2 in that conference. West Coast Express, I think they're in good shape again to finish 3rd or 4th. Certainly they need a healthy Aaron Ekblad. He's got to recover from that broken leg and be an impact player again for West Coast Express. The prediction that Arnie made here, or the Royals made, was predicting the Outlaws fall out of the playoff picture in the Howe division. Nick Utley won't be happy with that prediction. In favor of Brennan Kopp and the expansion Bentley Jacks. I certainly think that's a possibility. I think the Bentley Jacks are going to compete in year 1. I like their chances of making it, and potentially at the expense of the Outlaws. Dynasty, Mystics, and Tornadoes, they all have potential, but appear to be on the outside looking in on paper for the Howe division. And then, as you mentioned, Dean, when you look at the Orr division, Rock Republic, Brutes, Assassins, and Strong Island. I don't know if Jacob Cambridge and Arnie have a rivalry going on behind the scenes, but that is the Orr division, which also includes Duckman's Domination, is the toughest division to predict. I'll give Arnie that. But I think the defending division champion Titans are still the team to beat. And certainly they got to factor in the top 4 there with Cale Makar and David Pasternak, and that Titans roster is still loaded. They didn't do too much dismantling this offseason, so I think the Titans are the team to beat in the Orr division, but Rock Republic, Dean, likely a playoff lock again. I just don't see a division-winning roster on paper there. And then with the Brutes and Strong Island, those are also franchises that were playoff teams this past season, but they aren't as deep, Dean. They've had key losses. Shea Weber for the Brutes, Rasmus Dahlin for Strong Island as defenders, but I think there's still reasonable bets to retain those playoff spots, which could result in the same 4 franchises advancing to the playoffs from the Orr division as this past season. But Arnie has a new franchise in there. It's a bold pick on the Assassins, who I agree will be much improved and will compete for a playoff spot. I just don't know if they can knock out one of the 4 from last season. And Dean, my sleeper pick in the Orr division is the Snipers. Alex LeBlanc and the LeBlanc family have really overhauled and upgraded that roster, landing guys like Jack Eichel and Carey Price. And that really depends on what happens with Jack Eichel as to whether or not the Snipers could emerge as a surprise contender this season, depending where Eichel gets traded, depending if he gets this surgery that keeps him out to December, January. If he misses half the season, that might be a setback for the Snipers. But I really think they're a team on the rise with making a lot of win now moves. And certainly Kamikaze, Dean, will be in the mix again. Donnie Talk's Kamikaze franchise, as we've seen in the trade, they continue to upgrade the talent on the active roster, and they were one of the top 10 franchises in fantasy points per game over the second half of this past season. So I think Kamikaze is in the mix, especially with franchises voting not to lower the value of hits, because Kamikaze structured their team very much over a bunch of big hitters, heavy hitters. And then last but not least, Dean, Duckman's bringing up the rear again, but also much improved. And I will say, Dean, I do not think Duckmans they will no longer be last place overall. I think they'll still be a lottery team based on the current roster, but I don't have Duckmans as last place overall in the UFHL power rankings heading into this season.
Yeah, well, we do think we have taken steps forward. We've waddled forward, you might say, paddled forward. I think we might, finish maybe in 6th or 7th. I'm not sure. But I also think we could be a lottery. I don't think anybody has to worry about pushing for the playoffs, but we have improved the roster for sure. The goal is to keep getting experience for our players and get the best player we can in the draft. That's about as cliche as I will ever get. All right, what do you think about the predictions for Gretzky and Lemieux divisions?
Yeah, Dean, so we can start with the Gretzky division. Arnie has it, Grizzlies, Godfathers, Monarchs, Red Army. I also believe the Grizzlies are now the team to beat in this division, Dean, simply because Red Army, the defending division champion and obviously current reigning playoff champion, Luc Grenier, the former owner, did dismantle that roster on the way out, traded away 13 players, largely for futures and SEO. So Jeff Ray has had to rebuild that roster throughout the offseason and get some depth. I don't think they're there right now as far as contending for the division championship to repeat as the Gretzky division champions in the regular season. But I do think Red Army remains a playoff team despite falling from 1st to 4th in the Royals power rankings. The Royals, I'm also bullish on the Godfathers as a playoff franchise, and I like where Arnie put Rob Conti and Nelson Martins and Paul with the Godfathers. I like them as the 2nd seed in the Gretzky division. I also believe, Dean, the Generals, Curtis Johnson and Harrison Fallow. And again, we know Harrison and Arnie are big rivals, so maybe Arnie just didn't want to plug the Generals in there ahead of the Monarchs in the 3rd spot. But for me, I would give the 3rd seed to the Generals over the Monarchs. I think the Generals are trending up this season. They had so many players injured last season. If they're healthy, I think they're a playoff team, possibly ahead of Red Army in that 3-4 battle. But yeah, Generals and Godfathers, Dean, or Godfathers and Generals both make their playoff debut in the UFHL in 2022, replacing the Battlehawks and Stallions from last season as far as I see it. But for Arnie, he has the Monarchs, who were the playoff champion in the inaugural season, the 2020 season, with George Batchel as GM and Nikita Kucherov being healthy. Arnie has the Monarchs back in the playoff picture. And then the Lemieux division, Dean, Arnie has the same 4. This is the only division where Arnie had the same 4 franchises advancing to the playoffs as this past season: the Yetis, Stingrays, Ice Vikings, and Blades of Steel. The same 4 as last season, but a different order for the top 3, which I tend to agree here, Dean. I like the order that Arnie predicted, or the Royals predicted, but I do find it hard to bet against the Ice Vikings as the defending division champion and regular season champion, regular season winner Founders Trophy winner from the inaugural, or from this past season, the 2021 season, were the Ice Vikings. I think they're going to be a force again, especially, as I mentioned, with Kamikaze, with the value of hits remaining high. The Ice Vikings probably lead the league in hits, so they're going to be a force again. But both the Yetis and Stingrays have upgraded this offseason, and they're only going to get better. I think all three of those franchises are top 10, and then it's a matter of whether the Kryptonites, Warriors, and Eliminators can push Blades of Steel and compete for that fourth place, or potentially the crossover berth, Dean, which this past season the Kryptonites would have earned the crossover berth in the Allen Conference. The Kryptonites would have been the crossover team. They would have finished, they were 5th in the Lemieux division, but they would have had more fantasy points than 4th place Stallions from the Gretzky division in the wild card format, which, Dean, we should note is returning this season for both the NHL and the UFHL. So 5th place in one division can cross over and steal that 4th seed, the wild card seed from the other division. So one division could send 5 and one division could send 3 within a conference. We're looking at the Allen Conference, and certainly whether some of those Lemieux division franchises could potentially try to steal a seed from the Gretzky division.
All right. Good stuff from the Royals. Let's wrap up now quickly with a possible trade that could be happening any second, and some roster moves that are affecting and impacting UFHL teams.
Yeah, Dean, the Brock Besser trade, is it imminent? Is it pending? I thought maybe we would be waking up to some breaking news on the Brock Besser front, but it didn't happen yet. I know Yeti's GM, Scott Lowater, has been sleeping on a quality offer the past 2 nights now. On Wednesday, he posted he has a Besser offer on the table, taking last offers in tonight. That was Wednesday evening. The shoe hasn't dropped yet, but if I was to guess, Dean, I'm thinking Brock Besser. Look for a Canucks fan, one of the franchises that is run by a Canucks fan. Look for that franchise to potentially land Brock Besser here, possibly in a 2-for-2 swap with a defender in his prime, a defender around that same age, same, first round draft pedigree type player as Brock Besser, kind of that swap being the key return for the Yetis. So I see Brock Besser going in potentially a 2-for-2 trade involving a similar caliber defenseman around the same age and same pedigree. Going back to a franchise that is potentially run by a Canucks fan. So, when you got your favorite team in the NHL, you always want 1 or 2 of those players on your fantasy franchise. And Brock Besser could be going home to a Canucks fan. And that doesn't narrow it down too much, Dean. We have at least a half dozen Canucks fans in the UFHL. So if people are thinking, he's spilling the beans here and there's only 2 franchise possibilities, there's probably 5 or 6 that cheer for the Canucks. So I'm not narrowing it down too much.
I haven't had a favorite team since I started covering the NHL when I moved to Edmonton in 2003. I just, you can't really have a favorite team anymore when you're covering the league. The last favorite team I would have had would have been the Canadians that Andy Moog retired on. So I think that helps me not having that. I'm as the closest team that I would have is the Jets because I'm from Manitoba, but I don't have that. Like if I was in baseball, and I do this, I'm load up on the Dodgers, right? So I don't have that NHL favorite team. I think that actually helps me because you can pick up those guys and that's great, but you can get into that, I need another one or I want another one, or you feel much stronger about this player than you might a guy from the Red Wings or something if that's your team. So that's quite interesting and it's good to know. Sometimes you can find those guys that really love that type of player from that team and load up with them. So that's interesting. And we're always on the lookout for where our players are signing. There's so many guys that still have to get their contracts and how it's going to affect us. And certainly the Kotkaniemi news was front and center for the NHL and the UFHL.
Yeah, that was the big news as far as NHL roster moves go this week, Dean. The first successful offer sheet since Dustin Penner in 2007. The Montreal Canadiens did not match Carolina's offer for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Rock Republic owner Kyle Roberts is honoring the new contract for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, so he remains a member of Rock Republic in the UFHL, but now a member of the Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL. And then the domino effect there, Dean. Christian Dvorak of the Stallions in the UFHL is now with Montreal as Kotkaniemi's replacement. That's a nice landing spot for Dvorak. Likely more talent to work with in Montreal than Arizona. Probably better line mates, maybe some power play time. But there's always an adjustment when you go to a new team in the NHL in the real world. So I was just going to say, Dean, hopefully that pans out better for Montreal than acquiring Max Domi from Arizona, because obviously Max Domi didn't work out in Montreal. Hopefully Christian Dvorak from Arizona to Montreal works out a little better for Marc Bergevin, especially at the expense of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who was their third overall pick in 2018, ahead of guys like Brady Tkachuk, Quinn Hughes. That was a draft where you had a chance to really get a franchise player. Montreal reached for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and now Carolina has overpaid him and stole him via the offer sheet. Other than that, Dean, a pretty slow news week in the NHL. Really, I mean, how slow was it? The biggest signing of the week besides Jesperi Kotkaniemi offer sheet was Brad Richardson of the Battlehawks signing with the Calgary Flames. So as you can tell, we're talking bottom end of the roster guys here. Dennis Cholowski of the Crypto Knights signed with Seattle. He was drafted taken in the expansion draft from Detroit. I think Dennis Cholowski still has a lot of potential. He was a first-round pick, could be a bit of a late bloomer there in Seattle. Get a change of scenery could help him. And then guys that are no longer in the UFHL, no longer in the NHL, Dean. Jake Virtanen of Kamikaze is off to Russia. Jace Haralick of the Outlaws and Marcus Sorensen of Strong Island are both off to Sweden. Dominic Cahoon of the Gators and Dennis Malgin of West Coast Express are both off to Switzerland. And then guys looking to get back into the NHL and back into UFHL active rosters. Artem Anisimov, who finished last season with Ottawa, Artem Anisimov of the Assassins, is now on a PTO professional tryout in Colorado, joining Jack Johnson there. So Colorado's brought in Artem Anisimov and Jack Johnson on PTOs. Speaking of PTOs, Brian Boyle, who is a free agent in the UFHL, Dean, and Matt Barkowski, who is property of the UFAHL Rapids, which is Rock Republic's affiliate. Both of them have been invited to Pittsburgh's training camp on PTOs. And Brian Boyle might be an interesting one, Dean. We might see a free agent auction go up on Brian Boyle if he signs there. I think we will, because only if he signs, because they have to wait for the contract. But Pittsburgh is going to be without both Sidney Crosby and of Jenny Malkin to start the season. They're both going to be on the injured list to start the season. So I think you see Brian Boyle have a good shot at getting a bottom six or fourth line role in Pittsburgh, getting himself back in the league. And then last but not least, Dean, David Backus of the Blizzard has retired as a Blue. Obviously was a captain of the St. Louis Blues for a lot of years. He did the one-day contract back with St. Louis and retired as a Blue. So the Blizzard have David Backus now on the retired list.
Man, even when there's not a lot of news, there's still stuff going on. The Jake Virtanen thing, I always look back at the year he was drafted, and for whatever reason, Guy Flaming and I, and you were on the Pipeline show with us over the years, we couldn't figure out why Craig Button had Jake Virtanen ranked so like 41st or something, and he went 6th. I just couldn't figure it out, and it wasn't personal for anything for Craig. He just, something he didn't see, but it was like such an outlier with anything in that draft. And I'm not saying that, Craig was right, because Jake Virtanen could still get back into the NHL. We've seen that with lots of guys going overseas and coming back. But I always remember it was so weird, and hopefully the best for Shotgun Jake in Russia. All right, Larry, thank you so much for this episode. We'll be chatting with you very soon, tomorrow at the second owners meeting. Thanks so much, Larry.
Thanks again, Dean. Looking forward to tomorrow and the week to come.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, ufsn@uffsports.com.
All right, before we wrap up the show, I teased it earlier. We're going to go with the duck call at the end of every episode from now on. So today I just want to point out that I think this league is awesome, and I think we're making some great strides moving forward. As I've always said, we have to look at the big picture. And I think it's also great that there are some GMs that don't get along. We have our own version of Brian Burke, Kevin Lowe. In Colin Mills and Arnie from the Royals and the Mystics. I mean, it's clear that these guys don't get along. You throw Brent Baldwin in, he's kind of Mac T, where he's talking about the fire hose and things. And so I love it. I love that there's some, rivalries. Guys, you're not going to get along with everybody. I don't think Arlo and I have ever agreed on anything hockey-wise, But we see the big picture. We have respect for each other. I don't think that Mark Yates is a terrible person because he didn't vote. He decided to not vote on the one topic. I think is a bad judgment, but it doesn't mean he's a bad person and I don't like him. You know, I might not like some of the guys that I have to deal with. I didn't like the shtick that Luke used to do with the silent partner, but that's fine. That doesn't mean that we don't have a great product and we can't all get along. And sometimes you start thinking that you don't like a guy, you start talking to him a little bit more, or a girl, and you have a lot more in common than you think. So I think rivalries are great. Let's have Burke Lowe. Let's have all that. Let's, you trash talk your opponent in the playoffs or your rivalry in your division. But we also remember that we're building something here. We don't all have to be best friends, but we have to be smart business people. We have to make the best league possible. We have to think of more than just our teams, and we have to make sure that we ultimately have credibility. We'll keep going towards that at the meeting on Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern. I was incorrect with the earlier time, so make sure that you have all the information you need for that meeting. For Larry Fisher, our UFHL insider, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. We will chat with all of you once again, all the owners and GMs that will be attending at the second owners meeting tomorrow. Third one will be the weekend of the 18th. Best of luck to all the UFAHL scouts this weekend. That'll be trying to grab some future players as well. The hockey season is right around the corner, everybody. The UFHL season is set to begin. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk soon.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.